Hi, everybody. This is Chuck Bear. I'm a partner with Lapine Group, and welcome to part one of this mini video series about the business of blockchains and cryptocurrency. This is a talk that I gave a few weeks ago at Digital Orlando. It was really well received. I enjoyed doing it, and I got a lot of great feedback and interest in having some of this material online. So I thought what I'd do is break the talk down into the 5 sections and release them, one per day to make it kind of easy to digest, and it gives you all the material I covered with my voiceover for it. So I hope you find it helpful and interesting. This talk was really meant to be a bit different than maybe what you've seen about blockchains and cryptocurrency. I really wanted to get away from big ideas, which are fun to think about and they'll come, but really zero in on what's happening right now and who's doing business with cryptocurrency, who is using blockchain in business to realize real business goals. So it's a bit different from that, and the way I'm going to talk about the technology also is going to be much more from the business capability perspective. So I hope you find it useful. The plan over the next 5 days is to cover each of these sections. Today we're going to be going over some background. If you're new to cryptocurrency and blockchain, I think this will be helpful for you. And if you've even been around the space for a while, you might find it interesting how I've presented the technology. It's a bit different, and again, really focused on what's going on from a business value perspective. Then we're going to talk a bit about what's happening in the cryptocurrency space in terms of companies doing business and making money there. We'll talk about blockchain solutions next and go into some specific examples of what's being done there. Finally, we'll talk about how business services are supporting this space. And this is the sort of area where for those that aren't ready to dive in completely, or really you've got a line of service and this sort of becomes another tool in your toolkit rather than needing to jump completely into the cryptocurrency and blockchain space. And finally, we'll talk a bit about what I think is coming next. It's really an exciting area. And again, there's a lot of speculative and interesting ideas to talk about. And we'll get into a bit about where that's going in the final part of the series. So getting into just the basic background, I think the important thing to understand about blockchains from a business perspective is what they do, not so much how they work. So really what you've got in a blockchain is a protocol that can make decisions about transactions and a digital ledger that can record transactions. And it simply receives the transaction requests. The protocol figures out if it's valid. If it's not, it gets rejected. And if it is, it gets recorded into the digital ledger. And really that's about it. The big deal is that this protocol can't be cheated. And the digital ledger is permanent and indelible. Both of those are basically accomplished through public key cryptography that's really strong, and it's kind of a big deal. So that is what makes cryptocurrency possible and all the other magic that blockchains can potentially do. I do pause to focus on this a little bit because this is it. There's not more that a blockchain can really do. We'll get a little bit into more complex transactions, but if you are trying to solve a business problem that is not helped by an uncheatable protocol and permanent records, then probably a blockchain is not for you. But there is plenty that fits within that space. And again, I talked a little bit about what's the capabilities that come from this. They make cryptocurrencies possible. I mean, blockchain was invented to make Bitcoin work as the first cryptocurrency. So, that's its fundamental or initial use case. Then came tokens, which are really the idea of just representing something else, some other kind of asset on a blockchain. It can be, a US dollar in the case of Tether, use of a product or service in the case of the Augur Rep token. It can be CryptoKitties, which is really an entertainment product on a blockchain, which is interesting. But you can represent the ownership and even the attributes of many things just by recording them in that digital ledger. Authentication of records. I think what's interesting here is maybe you're not even interested in moving balances around or tracking assets, but you just need to be able to record that, hey, these two parties entered into some kind of agreement on this date. A blockchain actually potentially solves for that. You can have different kinds of arrangements for access and privacy. So the original Bitcoin blockchain is actually very, very open. Anybody in the world can use it, and the records are unencrypted and available for anybody to see, all the transactions over all time. The only thing that gives it any amount of anonymity is that you can create a Bitcoin address, and so long as nobody can connect it with you personally, you're kind of anonymous, but basically it's not very anonymous. So later, digital ledger technologies came up with ways to control both access and privacy. Some of these are applied to cryptocurrencies like Monero and Zcash, where they're trying to make a more private cryptocurrency. And of course, in business solutions, this is pretty necessary. You don't want to allow anybody into a business system, and you don't want to reveal all the records of your interactions with your business partners to other business partners. You can have more complex transactions. So I mentioned that really that transaction validation and recording model is kind of it for what a blockchain can do, but the transactions can be fairly complex, including conditional things like maybe I am buying a CryptoKitty from you and you must have, that CryptoKitty and I must have enough money, all the way to much more complex things, which can include distributed applications. So this is where you're taking those transactions and defining very complex ones in smart contracts and sort of stringing that together to create an actual application that runs on the blockchain. And I mentioned the Augur Rep token. The Augur service is an example of that. It is a prediction market that allows you to basically bet on the outcome of real world events. It has a whole reporting system. It's based on some interesting behavioral economics. And the way you use this is all entirely on the Ethereum blockchain. So also setting up for this discussion, I think something important, especially if you're new to this space, to understand is what I'll call the digital ledger family tree. So I mentioned that Bitcoin was the original cryptocurrency. Blockchain was embedded for Bitcoin. And from that have come kind of two fields of thought, which people tend to talk about differently. It's different people and companies working on these things. They're maybe not technically so separate as people think about them, but it's really the world of cryptocurrencies where you have projects and teams really working to make better digital money, digital asset platforms. And then you've got the world of blockchain solutions, which really kind of started with some of industry looking at Bitcoin and the technology behind it and saying, we're not so much interested in the cryptocurrency, but this whole thing of having an unbeatable protocol and indelible records is interesting to us. We can solve some business problems with that. So you have this sort of world of platforms and frameworks for building solutions like that. And really between these two, there's a lot of gray area. I mean, including I'm showing here at the top, the XRP cryptocurrency, and at the bottom, Ripple, the platform. So XRP is the cryptocurrency of Ripple. Ripple, though, really is focused on solving business problems, mostly in the financial services sector. So again, this is not maybe a real divide. It is sort of a mental divide, I guess, and what people are focused on. So same Bitcoin, blockchain technology under all of it. Just, one world is really thinking about digital money and digital assets, and the other is thinking about business solutions. And finally, I think, now, given what's happened over the last few years, there's a lot of questions of, what happened here? There's not been a lot of great news. So what happened? I think, honestly, it's just very simple. Most people have probably seen something like this, the Rogers adoption curve. Over time, you get your innovators and early adopters, and then things really start to kick in. And, we're probably about here when it comes to cryptocurrency. If you think about really using cryptocurrency and blockchains, there's a lot of talk, a lot of interest, a lot of speculation. But when you think about who's actually using it for uses other than just speculating right now, it's a very short list. And at the same time, what you had was a ton of money flow in really fast, right? So sometime late 2017, the public kind of first discovered this, and money came in, and there were not enough good projects and ideas to absorb that, and not enough real world use to justify the prices. So it ran up and then it did collapse. But I think the important lesson here is that from my perspective, this is what happened, and it entirely has to do with money flowing into a space before the space was ready for it, and it has nothing to do with the technology. The technology is fine. There was no event that happened with any major cryptocurrency or blockchains in general that triggered this sell-off. It was just really a classic bubble of money rushing in and then rushing out. So that covers our first section. In the next talk, we'll get into what's going on in the cryptocurrency space. Thanks for listening, and see you tomorrow.